This is Public Policy, and I'm your professor, Dr. Patrick Stewart. The purpose of this class is to provide insights into how public policy models are developed. While much research focuses on the end product, the outputs of public policy scholars and practitioners themselves are well aware of the relationship between the process and the policy product that results. Because historically, the institutional approach predominated in understanding politics and policy, the focus was on how policy was made, not necessarily what happened afterwards. With this institutional approach, the focus was on the actors, rules, procedures, and governmental entities that comprise the policy-making process. At the same time, there is a focus on the bias of individual institutions, such as Congress, the courts, and the executive branch, and governmental entities that comprise the policy-making process, and how they influenced even to the point of predetermining the outcome of policy decisions. Obviously, this is highly narrow and is rather myopic, especially when considering the scientific advances being made in describing how policy is being created. Public policy research was ripe for a more expansive perspective that considered policymaking from systemic and individual perspectives, as well as considering what exactly occurred during the process of decision-making and policymaking. The four readings considered take more of a broader perspective than the previous institutionally oriented approaches, allowing not only for greater insights than had been the case in the past, but opening the door for more systematic theories of public policy. Even though these approaches might be considered flawed, simplistic, or even just unrealistic, they set the stage for future theoretical approaches now being used. The first segment considers work by David Easton done in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and was published in 1965. Easton's book, A Framework for Political Analysis, presents just that, a systems theory that became highly influential. As was the case with much of the research coming out of the post-World War II era, it was influenced by systems analysis developed by the military. At the same time, it reflected the needs of the era to deal with stressors in traditional societies that had been colonized, but had found their independence as the colonial powers were either defeated or greatly reduced in power. As noted by Easton, the post-war era was marked by complex interlocking influences amongst nations in unprecedented numbers and scale, relocation of population from rural to increasingly overcrowded urban areas, and perhaps more pertinently for the international order, there was a creation of an elite that was Western educated, and they're slowly inculcating these Western values to their broader societies, with new values arising as a transactional cash economy replaced traditional network ties within communities. Even stability in society provided a special example of imperceptible change. In summary, Easton attempted to understand the massive change going on around the world at that time. He did so by positing a model that could be seen as heavily influenced by biological approaches, in which there is a system and an environment around that system. Inputs involve the pressures flowing from the environment to the political system to bring about a change in the allocations of values represented in the political system. Supports refers to the actions or orientations promoting and resisting a political system. These turn into withinputs as they flow through the political system, with decisions made by those holding authority in the form of rules, regulations, laws, actions, and so on, ultimately becoming outputs. These outputs then are converted into inputs as they make their way through the environment and affect those in the environment, providing feedback into the system. While we are most familiar with a simplified model, Easton saw the high level of complexity that might exist and the need to address interactions in a political manner by leaders as they were attempting to develop support for new political authority. This meant understanding that political change may be conceptualized by taking into account different criteria of change, including its direction, rate of change, and the outcome of the change itself on the system. This meant understanding change in volume and variety of demands that had been fundamentally neglected. And while it was a simplification of the world through these stages, the development of the systems model led to the development of other models in the time since.